So thank you everyone for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transport. This is going to be a short video about regional rail again, and to be very clear, when I say regional rail, I mean what we call regional rail here in Germany, not the American idea, which is what we call in Germany S-Bahn normally. Sometimes RegionalBahn, but mostly S-Bahn. And so when I say regional rail, think about slow trains that connect pretty random places, or maybe they connect random places to cities, but these random places cannot possibly be suburbs of those cities, otherwise it would be some kind of commuter rail. Now, sometimes we can turn regional rail into commuter rail. Just as a reminder, I'm speaking Euro-English right now, not American Transit Activist English. So you can have, for example, regional trains from Berlin to Brandenburg, the city, not the state that is named after the city. And these are regional trains that kind of overlie. So I think at this point, it's a train every 20 minutes. It used to be a train every 30. They only changed up to 20, I think, maybe a few months ago. Maybe this year, maybe at the end of last year. So that would be a regional train that is slowly being transformed into a more urban and suburban train. But usually these are things that are distinct from urban as well as intercity trains. As such, everywhere that I'm aware of, such trains receive heavy subsidies. This even includes Japan, where these trains have been spun off to third sector railways, which is a euphemism for they're owned by the prefectures or by corporations that are owned by the prefectures, which then subsidize them. Not all third sector railways lose money. I think that Tsukuba Express doesn't, but the Tsukuba Express is literally a relief line for the Juoban line. It connects to Tokyo. It goes to Akihabara, so that is governed maybe as a state-owned corporation. Based, I don't mean state, I mean prefecture-owned corporation. A corporation owned by several prefectures, I think. But that's urban and suburban, and I'm talking about things that are neither, but also not intercity. Now, I did talk about the three-way distinction between urban/commuter/suburban trains, which can make money, often do in even medium-sized cities, like in Berlin, the U-Bahn made money, was breaking even before Corona. Intercities, which basically everywhere in the developed world make money, or at least break even, and regionals, which basically never do. And the thing is, I want to zoom about the regionals is talk about a certain regional trip that I took earlier today. I took this regional trip because we were in Hamburg. We had 2 nights at a hotel. The hotel was a disaster. And watchers who are into art/neoliberal thing might be interested in the aspect of small business versus big business. The short version is small business does not have enough guarantee of quality. Actually, my trip to New York in February and early March had that problem as well, where the independently owned hotels all had something wrong with them, and then when we found a chain, like a 3-star chain in Long Island City, it actually worked out okay. I think even cost the same. It wasn't we were paying a premium. It was just the standards were better. So anyway, we left early, and because our intercity ticket could not be moved, we had to ride free regional trains. And it was kind of fascinating how so we Deutschland ticketed the way back home from Hamburg. The trip was a bit more than 4 hours. I think it was maybe 420 something. Maybe 421. With obligatory delays, the transfer was supposed to have a lot of spare time, but it was 3 minutes or something like that because the first train was also delayed. It was Hamburg. So I think the only trains that go from Hamburg direct to Berlin are intercities. So not Deutschland ticket trains. The intercities do it in 1 hour 45. We did the trip in 4 hours and a bit, as I said. And was almost just going on the line, just detouring a little bit to Schwerin. And so it was, I think, Hamburg RegionalExpress 1 that goes to Schwerin, and then Rostock, and then Berlin slash Northeast Germany RegionalExpress 8, which does Wismar, Schwerin, then goes to Berlin, and basically the entire trip, except the detour to Schwerin, was on the Hamburg to Berlin line. So it was about, so this is the total length, in possibly missing a few kilometers because we got off at S-Bahn, but it doesn't really matter. This is a little more than 4 hours, and I point this up, and I bring this up because if it's something like this, then the average speed was not bad for a stopping train. But let's try to zoom in and look at these cities, but at what's actually between Hamburg and Schwerin, or between Schwerin and Berlin. Actually, open railway map, that'd be a little bit better just for looking at this. Unfortunately, I guess everything here is abbreviated to death. So let's see. Actually, I think the blue stations are exactly the ones that the RegionalExpress stops at. The RegionalExpress is not quite a stopping train. It skips some things. So I remember the first stop out of Hamburg was actually Bergedorf. So I'm pretty sure the largest thing in between all of this would be Büchen. How many people do we think live in Büchen? Can't be that many, right? Okay, so it's not even a Kreisfreistadt, it's in a district. And it has only 6,000 people? Wow, I was gonna guess very low 5 figures. Okay, no, 4 figures, lol, yeah. Okay, I guess the entire Kreis is 200, but it's not even the capital of the Kreis, Büchen. The capital is Ratzeburg. How many people live in Ratzeburg? Okay, this is 14, which is still not even a village, but yeah, it's here, and I'm talking about something that is about Büchen being here. So this is basically a suburb of Hamburg. Is how to explain it, but not sufficiently close that you would get a lot of commuter travel, at least not by train. The thing that I would like to point out about this trip is there was practically no turnover. Practically everyone that I saw in the upper deck of the car on the first trip, which was Hamburg to Schwerin, rode all the way to Schwerin. Maybe some people continued on to Rostock. I don't think it's most people. Actually, most people got off at Schwerin. So Büchen, which is, for all intents and purposes, an exurb of Hamburg, I don't think had any turnover. Wittenberg, which I don't remember if the train stopped at Wittenberg. They must have. Or maybe not. Oh, right, because why would they go like this? They would go like this, I guess. So yeah, the trains diverted at Hagenau. And all of these, maybe they also started thinking in Shanghai. This was not, it wasn't just the blue stops. And we're talking, I don't even remember that these stops consistently had even a single person get off or on the train. Some did, but it wasn't even like one person getting on or off as far as I could see. And again, I saw the entire upper deck of one car. So, and it was full to seated capacity of the train. To the point that I worried on both legs that we would have to stand. We didn't. There were people who sat on the stairs, a handful. There were a very small handful of empty seats. So, for all intents and purposes, we're talking about a train that's full to seated capacity. Upper deck, I'm guessing, had, 60 seats maybe that I could see, somewhere between 40 and 60. And the point is that I didn't consistently see anyone get off or on at any of these intermediate stops. Maybe one at Hagenau or something like that, or one at Holthausen. And then the majority of the train emptied at Schwerin Hauptbahnhof. I imagine switching to the train to Berlin, which was a 3-minute connection, so it's not like I tracked where everyone was going. So it's not like I could see the exact tide of people doing this. Mostly we were rushing because I was worried about not getting a seat on the connecting train as well. But the point is that there's this stopping train which runs every hour to Büchen, and every other train, so every 2 hours, the train gets to Schwerin. And despite making all these intermediate stops, it's for all intents and purposes a slow, free intercity train from Hamburg to Schwerin. And I say free because it's not technically free, it's on the Deutschland ticket. The Deutschland ticket is 49 euros a month, valid everywhere in Germany except on intercity trains. There are some quibbles about certain things. It may or may not be valid. I think it's not valid on certain privately operated things. I know that Flix was mad that they weren't included. Regional rail. So Dark Shadow. So regional rail can often go past. So past 100 miles, it's kind of complicated because all of these are intercity trains. The reason they're called regional and not intercity is that in many cases these are trains that couldn't make money because I'm dumping on how tiny. I'm dumping on how tiny some of these. Some of these towns are. But it's not like Schwerin or Rostock. I mean, maybe Rostock is more substantial, but this is Schwerin. Schwerin is about 100,000 people. Now, 100,000 people is not nothing. I would not be able to even tell you how many people were O&D at that train station because the train was supposed to have to give us, I think, an 11-minute connection, but it was late 8 minutes, so we had a 3-minute connection, which means I didn't have time to, let's say, get out of the train station and walk around city center for 5 minutes, which I absolutely would have otherwise, or buy anything or observe the flow of passengers. So I can't tell how many people were using this as an intercity to Schwerin as opposed to a free intercity between Hamburg and Berlin. I expect it was mostly a free intercity between Hamburg and Berlin. I'm basing this on a different regional trip, a pair of regional trips that I took last summer, when it was the same thing, free trains on the €9 ticket. It was to Leipzig, where at the connecting station, which was, to be fair, much smaller than Schwerin, it was very clear everyone was getting off just to connect from Berlin to Leipzig. And so essentially what's going on here is that now we will say on the connecting train, it was not as stark where basically everyone rode end to end. A large majority of the people in our car rode end to end from Schwerin to Berlin as well. There was not a lot of turnover all the way from Schwerin to Berlin. There was a little bit. There were there were a handful, and now I'm saying I've observed a handful, but it's not like I have a view of the entire train. It's not a handful per entire train. It's a handful per. For the first train, it was one deck of one car, and this was, I don't even remember, maybe also one deck of one car or a middle deck of a split level. So out of maybe, 20 people that I see, let's say 15 were some kind of end-to-end. Then, as soon as we got to the built-up area of Berlin, by which I do not mean the suburbs that should be getting S-Bahn service extended from Spandau, which are now in Falkensee. I don't think anyone got in now, and maybe one or two at Falkensee. And then at Spandau, the train was suddenly full to well beyond seated capacity because this was a regional train that gets people to the airport. So if you're from Spandau, that is your way to get to the airport. If you're from City West, that is how you're getting to the airport. You get on at Zoologischer Garten and getting to the airport. And then the train started emptying at Hauptbahnhof off in Point East. And we got off at where we live at Ostbahnhof. And so essentially this was an intercity train cosplaying as a regional train. All of these stops in the middle barely even mattered combined. Now, these, I suspect, used to be intercity trains. This is what I'm saying about the definition of regional, are going past 100 miles. Or LA San Diego. LA San Diego is actually a good example of the financial equivalent of, what is it, in Greece, Milat Povsenag. Yeah, this. So an intercity train that doesn't make money is a regional train that makes money is intercity. So what I mean is that LA to San Diego is by all means an intercity train. Now we can even talk about how it is defined as an intercity versus regional. So something like New York to New Haven is clearly used as a commuter train. It has a title like you can look at the timetables between New York and New Haven, and that's very clearly used as a commuter line. But at end-to-end scale to New Haven itself, it's intercity. The ridership, and I'm saying the ridership, like it's like I've updated figures rather than figures from charitably 8 years ago. But so look how much more traffic there is even all the way from New Haven at rush hour than off-peak. But the ridership is actually very the ridership is actually pretty even. I'm not sure about all day, but New Haven gets the same ridership on a weekend day as on a weekday. So that's used as intercity, not commuter. The intercity doesn't really have regional rail in the way I'm defining it, unless you maybe count the Hartford line. It's just commuter and intercity. LA to San Diego is very clearly intercity. It doesn't have this kind of tidal thing where off-peak it's 2 trains an hour, and then at rush hour it is more than that. I don't know that much more. I mean, I guess because you have all these staggered expresses, and if it's just stuff that gets to New Haven, if it goes all the way to New Haven, it's maybe 4 an hour peak, like 1, 2, 3, 4. No, wait, way more than that, because you have this tide, right? You start it at 7:14 or 7:15, it's 5. Or drop this and add this, and it's 5. Yeah, okay. 5 versus 2 is still very tidal. Normally, commuter trains in large cities stop at a factor of 2 in Tokyo. I think Paris is almost 2 sometimes. London is, I forgot, 1.5 to 1. It's like the Elizabeth line is 24 trains an hour peak, 16 off peak. Berlin is often just flat all day. And so the point is that LA to San Diego doesn't have this. It's pretty flat. So it's used as intercity. Yeah. I know it's based on distance, but the thing is that these are 2 different city cores, and certainly when you think about how to run it, you should think in terms of intercity. That is to say, 2 distinct city cores with a lot of travel between the city cores, or from the hinterlands of one core to the core of the other. You should not really think of it as a railway that people use to commute. It is not all rural because it is, connecting. It's entirely urban, and suburban, the land use. It's run by Amtrak as if it's an intercity, but it's subsidized by the state of California. Again, Milat, Pov, Seneg, Negrish, Semilat. If Amtrak were more competent, Amtrak would be making money on this train, and then it would not need money from California to run it. And so, right, I'm defining it by subsidies because my point is that in Germany, they've redefined a lot of entirely intercity connections. Like, I don't actually know the history, so I don't know if Berlin to Schwerin is one of them. I'm almost certain it is. Berlin to Schwerin is... so I don't actually know, because this is the sum total of... Not this. I exit 337 or whatever it was the sum total of both, but this was the longer leg, so I'm guessing Berlin to Schwerin is well north of, it has to be well north of 200 kilometers. I mean, I can do something very brutal like this. This is more than 200, and I'm going a little bit farther because the trains don't travel in quite a straight line. Yeah, it's probably like 210, I'm guessing, and then this would have been 120 maybe? Yeah, sounds about right. I mean, I have the numbers here. It doesn't matter that much. And so this is, I'm almost certain, something that was just reclassified as regional because Deutsche Bahn was not making money off of it, and so they said that unless, I guess it would be the state of Märkische, that's a Berlin housing project, unless the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern subsidized it, they would stop running it. The train was not even branded as Deutsche Bahn; it was branded as the Northeast Authority. The Wi-Fi was branded as the Northeast German Authority. This is very much something that, if Deutsche Bahn were making money off of, would be called an intercity, but it can't. These are for all intents and purposes intercity trains, and even Hamburg to Schwerin. When I think of a regional train, I think of a train that is based on very heavy turnover. I think of a train where a lot of the intermediate markets matter at regular spacing. And actually, I dump on the idea of LA to San Diego, but LA to San Diego is a place where I think the intermediate markets matter. Now, I'm not going to actually. Now, I could, if I wanted, boot the Amtrak numbers. All I remember is that LA Union Station is, I think, like top. It's maybe the 5th busiest Amtrak station. It goes, if I remember correctly, New York, DC, Philadelphia, Chicago, LA, Boston, maybe. I may be flipping LA and Boston. I don't remember, but I remember that the top four, the top six are 4 main Northeast corridor cities, and then Chicago and LA. And there's a pretty steep drop off from there, and but there's still, but this is at the end of the day a trash train that is not electrified, and that, I mean, I praise Deutsche Bahn for having this kind of stopping train that is averaging 75 kilometers an hour. This averages maybe that on a train that that acts like it's intercity, where they should be averaging, which would be electrified and averaging 100 something with all the stops. Like, this is a much faster line. This is a line that's very straight. It does have the issue that on the chunky part of it, which is here, it's between Redondo and Fullerton, is a freight main line, but it's not long enough to matter. Are you really going to only tell me the track? Okay. Oh, miles. Okay, so I don't care about the north. I care about the south. 357 to 563. That is 206 kilometers. How long does it take? No, I don't care about the average journey time. Yeah, they say this, but this includes LA to San Luis Obispo, which is trash tracks with not even that heavy freight traffic anymore, but it's still designed to be freight primary. I think maybe still owned by Union Pacific or something. Let's check. LAX to San Diego. I think it's SAN. Yeah. These 206 kilometers, is that what? That's what, 2.5 hours maybe? 245, I think. Almost 3. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm dumping on this regional train that averages still more than these trains, which are on straighter tracks. Note, no, there's no rush hour title anything. It's kind of on a talk with some missing trains. SNCF would love this. It would not love that the track quality is trash, but it would love how weird the service is. Oh, I'm sorry, Marta. My condolences. So, but the point is that, so we're not talking about art. So the point is that we're talking about the surf line. We're talking about what it can be, not what it is. And my point is that a lot of the stuff in the middle actually is useful. So let's see. Anaheim is Disneyland. Um, all of this is pretty endless suburbia. People actually live here. Like it's not. Um, so as a destination, I don't think people care very much about Santa Ana or Fullerton. But first of all, Disneyland, that's not nothing. And second, as an Argent, yeah, people might actually do this to San Diego. I mean, probably people from, if you're in Orange County, you're probably going to drive, but um, if you make the train actually useful to the point that some people might voluntarily choose to live in Orange County and not own a car, it's not really a thing that happens in Southern California today. In Southern California, if you don't own a car, it's because you're too poor to own a car. The example I keep going to is that in New York and San Francisco, gentrifying neighborhoods see urban rail ridership rise as they gentrify because gentrifiers are more likely to be working in city center. So then they will just forego the car because it's convenient to. In the case of New York, it's the L train from deeper into used to be Williamsburg, now Bushwick, and San Francisco, and forgetting the neighborhoods. And they're replacing partly they're displacing poor people who would be taking the train either way, but they're also displacing small business owners who have cars because they work locally. In LA, gentrifying neighborhoods are seeing rail ridership fall because this is East LA. As this area is gentrifying, rail ridership there is going down because even when the trains exist in LA, they're not actually good enough to take you to where you want to go. LA does not have that kind of strong city center employment. Maybe eventually it'll centralize enough, maybe when they finally build the West Side Subway, when they complete the West Side Subway, maybe with Century City it'll start looking better, but first I'm skeptical, and second, I'm talking about the present. But in the future, if Southern California gets to the point that people can forego the car, even if it's not a lot of people, even if it's people who are kind of enviro martyrs, in a place like Bavaria outside Munich, yeah, it's still a lot of enviro martyrs. Whereas in Southern California, it's not enviro martyrs. In Southern California, it's just poor people. And so the point is that potentially you could even have some walk up ridership or bus to train ridership from, again, Anaheim, Santa Ana. Santa Ana is also not very wealthy. That might even happen there. No structure over the density there at all. Santa Ana has high population density because of overcrowding, not because of any kind of TOD. And yeah. Irvine, hard to say. Irvine's loaded. Irvine has jobs, and I know this because I know Blizzard is based there, but the jobs do not cluster near the train. Like, this is the train. This is where you're starting to see places with like more employment concentration. So here it's a land use issue mostly that means the intermediate stops suck, but that is fixable. There's a lot of demand for building new housing in California, maybe less than in San Francisco, but this is still California and not Wyoming. So yeah, there are a bunch of places. So that I'm almost tempted to say might look regional, but it's not really because there's very little between here and here. So it's essentially intercity, which again can pretend to be regional for tax purposes, but intercity. Yeah. SNCF would really love the midday gap. That said, SNCF might be apoplectic if it thought of LA as a large city, because if you think of LA as a large city, then SNCF would be switching its gears from, it's like the commuter trains in Bordeaux or wherever, we're going to call it RL if we're going to run more than a train every hour. Or it might switch from that to, this is like Paris. Why aren't the trains running every 10 minutes? Okay, it's SNCF. Why are the trains not running every 15 minutes? So yeah, um, this is an intercity line that's used more as a commuter line. Maybe not as far as New Haven, but certainly as far as Bridgeport. So might as well extend runs to New Haven. Um, and the point is that these kind of regional lines, again, I'm going to start with the ones that I rode just here and the one that I rode last summer when I was visiting Leipzig. They're not regional lines. Yeah, they make stops, but the intermediate stops are basically worthless. They're those that people can say we have a train, but I'm not even seeing the enviromartyrs on these trains. The enviromartyrs absolutely exist. There are places where there are people who are kind of weird and choose to forego the car even when the car is more convenient, but that's not at the intermediate stops. That would be at a place like Schwerin, maybe Wismar, Rostock. I actually don't know to what extent enviromartyrs would even live in these places. Like that part of East Germany is like if you're left wing, you're old left to the point that the minister president of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern loves the pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, and was really mad that it was cancelled, to the point that there are suspicions of that it's not just economic development for her. There might be actual ideological Putinism there. So maybe East German places will not be the best place where I'm going to call people environmentalists, but in West Germany, the equivalent, yeah, I mean, yeah, Augsburg exists, Würzburg, I don't know, Ulm, all the university towns, so Göttingen, Heidelberg, and so on. These are places where it's generally more convenient to drive. But you can choose to forego the car and you'll be okay. And then the places in the middle just don't. Maybe in theory, but in practice, again, I didn't see anyone get on in Büchen, as far as I remember. Again, maybe one person. And that is true of the other intermediates. I don't remember if maybe I saw. I remember the train was stopped at Ludwigslust for a while, maybe because there was a timed overtake with an ICE. And I bring this up that there was a timed overtake with the ICE because my contention is that these regional trains remove value from the network. Why do I say that they remove value from the network? Well, as regional trains, they're not worth very much. The only thing that I would be getting on these trains service that they would not get on an ICE is that they make more stops in Berlin. The ICEs that go to Berlin, when they are in Berlin, what they do is they go to the west. They enter from the west always because Berlin is at the eastern end of Germany. So they always, or almost always, maybe there's some super expresses that don't. They stop at Spandau. Then they stop at Hauptbahnhof. They either go the fast way or the slow way. The fast way then would lead to Zidkreuz. The slow way would then lead to Ostbahnhof. Usually, I don't think trains actually ever terminate at Hauptbahnhof. They would go all the way to the end. North-south there would be Gesundbrunnen if they come from here, or Spandau if they come from here, and then Hauptbahnhof and then Zidkreuz. East-west you would think Westkreuz and Ostkreuz, but no, it's Spandau, Hauptbahnhof, and Ostbahnhof. And then the regionals and the regional express trains make more stops. Our trains, which was RegionalExpress, but it would skip some stops, but actually was making all of the mainline stops on the S-Bahn. So the rule is that depending on how fast the train is, I think basically everything that's not an ICE that goes east-west on the S-Bahn also stops at Zoologischer Garten, which used to be the Hauptbahnhof of West Berlin. Ostbahnhof was the Hauptbahnhof of East Berlin. Hauptbahnhof, what is now Hauptbahnhof, did not exist. It was built only in the 2000s. And then maybe more trains might stop at Friedrichstraße, maybe at Alexanderplatz, Ostkreuz. Anyway, our train stopped at all of them. And these are all the mainline stops on the S-Bahn. It turns out to be every other stop on the S-Bahn, as opposed to the S-Bahn stops. like, or rather every other S-Bahn stop. And yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing where you can get through the work, the bar, and the supermarket without a car, but this is something that doesn't really happen past a certain commute distance. Again, it might be happening in Falkensee and Nauen, and this is why they're extending the plans to extend the S-Bahn there. And maybe it's just because it's a weekend I didn't see people make the trip, and if I were boarding at 8 in the morning at Falkensee, I would see a tidal wave of standees from Falkensee to the city. But it's remarkable that on the actual S-Bahn, I see people get on and off these stops even when it's middle of the day on Saturday. Whereas clearly this was a pure intercity train, so it doesn't really have regional value except insofar as it makes more stops in Berlin. But it does muck up the network because it gums up the line from Berlin to Hamburg because it has 2 tracks. It has trains with different speed classes. I think there's a section here that's 4 tracks. I think this might be 4 tracks. Let's actually check this, I'm curious. Because certainly if it's just 2 tracks and you're timing overtakes, then you're just making sure that the trains will not be able to be very reliable because this is a complex system. One delay will cascade. I mean, both the trains that we took were delayed by a couple of minutes. This looks like just 2 tracks. Maybe 2 tracks and 2... Are these... What is it? Oh, 2 main and 2... These look like... These are said to be industrial. I think it was actually 4 tracks. I remember seeing 4 tracks part of the way, but I guess that ends at Falkensee. And maybe if you can extend that to Nauen, then sure. But when you have 2 tracks and you make all these stops, where I wish to emphasize again, practically nobody got on or off. You're slowing down the intercities, and yes, you can time overtakes. This is Deutsche Bahn. This is not an American amateur operation. But I repeat myself. But what they cannot do is run a relatively self-contained service. And if they can't run self-contained service, then either you're investing a lot of money into the most strategic places to overtake, but then the timetable keeps deteriorating, so they become less strategic, or you just take the hit on the timetable padding, and Deutsche Bahn chose to take the hit on timetable padding, and this is how Berlin-Hamburg, a line that at opening was supposed to take 1 hour 30, and even that was with padding, it was doable for 1 hour 20. It takes 1 hour 47 right now. I don't actually have strong opinions about what they should be doing once they're in Berlin. I suspect that they should not be making too many stops. I can see a world in which you do a weird thing where you go Ostbahnhof, Hauptbahnhof, Zoo, Spandau. Those other intermediate stops, Alexanderplatz and Friedrichstraße, yeah, I get where they make them. Especially if it's a train that's designed also to take people from the city to the airport, then the extra connections are important. But as an intercity, I mean, people can just change to the Stadtbahn, to the S-Bahn. Yeah, and this is where you should do greenfield high-speed rail, but between Berlin and Hamburg, Berlin to Hamburg is not actually a great greenfield high-speed rail corridor, because it's mostly just end-to-end Berlin-Hamburg, plus Hamburg-Leipzig, Hamburg-Dresden. That's not how you get from Hamburg to Munich, because I think even today with slowdowns at both ends, you go over Hanover. And this is actually capable of being sped up. I mean, it's being legislated at the speed of German legislation, which is, how many tanks did Ukraine get? 80? I mean, like, Leopard 2s, I don't mean trash tanks from the 50s and 60s. Maybe not 50s, but 60s. like Germany is very slow about these things, uh, and so the point is that this is like I guess eventually it's also Berlin to Copenhagen, because they are digging this tunnel. They aren't really doing much work on the approaches, especially on the German side. But so this is supposed to be 2.5 hours. Could be 1.5 if they made an effort. But this is something that actually works okay as a 230 kilometer an hour legacy line. Again, it's an hour. It's something that's doable for an hour and a half. A greenfield high-speed train would not do it in an hour. It would do it in maybe an hour 10. So you're spending a lot of money on, relative to best practices on existing tracks, about 20 minutes. So about nobody using the regional because it's being delayed by the intercity. Remember, Marta, the regionals were delayed. This was delayed 8 minutes. This was delayed 4 minutes. This is not. The intercity is not why the regional is terrible. The train was full, but there were a handful of empty seats. So I doubt there was substantial crowding out of people who would have gotten on the train if it were less crowded. I mean, it was hectic, but the alternative would be a train that would be mostly empty seats. It's not like, again, the train was not actually overcrowded at any point, except maybe once we started hitting Spandau, and then it was just an internal train to the Berlin metro area. That's very different. So what they should be doing is they should be running these as, I think, as intercities, and doing an intercity at this scale is kind of weird. But something that doesn't actually make these stops maybe makes the most stops that you can reasonably expect on an intercity. So something like something like Hagenau or something like that, but not a lot of stops, and then Schwerin, and likewise here Schwerin, and then certainly once you're on the main line, you stop at Ludwigslust, that's fine, but then consider actually going non-stop Berlin to Ludwigslust. Maybe stop at Wüsten. I don't even know. The problem is that, again, these are not substantial settlements or substantial stops. Because these are not even proper suburbs of Berlin or Hamburg or whatever, and this means that the idea that you take the train to work, why would you be taking the train to work? The employment, I mean, when you go to sufficiently small places, the employment is either a small shop, so unless it's at the train station, it's not especially rail oriented, and also, and if there's some kind of I don't actually know if there's industry here, but if there is, it would just be a factory that people would drive to. There might be some retail next to the train station, but I mean, even that. And I mean, bear in mind, in Berlin Mitte, the supermarkets have parking. The supermarkets don't think it's entirely accessible by rail. Now I can't tell you how full these parking lots are. These not parking lots, they're parking garages. But they exist. So regional service. Okay, so first of all, in Copenhagen, the S-Tog is actually pretty self-contained. I was literally just there. The S-Tog in Copenhagen is rather self-contained. I think the farthest away sections of it are Köln and Frederiksberg or something like that. And then it's forced transfers. The limited stops beyond the core is on lines that again only extend, I don't know, about 40-ish kilometers out. So that's not, I would not call it regional rail. When the train runs every 10 minutes all day, and yeah, so not Frederiksberg, some I can't actually pronounce Danish. You're supposed to, in Danish, roughly the rule is that all the letters are silent, and then in Swedish every letter is overpronounced. Yeah, I think these are forced transfers. In this case, it would be Hillerød. I don't know what's at Fredrikstad. Not Sund. It's not Germany. Fredrikstad. I guess Helsing has this kind of forced transfer system. That actually is a third regional train. There are third regional trains in Copenhagen. It's just that the S-Tog is rather self-contained. And yeah, some of the S-Tog trains run express a little bit, making all the city stops, of course. You can see here they skip a little bit. Here they skip a little bit. And it's kind of weird in that the A and E run together, but here the A is express and the E is the local, and here the E is express and the A is local. I have no idea why. But but for example, this line, the F, is 12 kilometers. Like this is a schematic. This is not geographically accurate. And but again, that's not regional rail, and that's not really competing with intercity for anything. Whereas this does. This is something that, again, should be probably intercity from Hamburg to Schwerin and then Rostock, and then intercity from Wismar to Schwerin. Again, if it's something that you can see a rather local ICE stop at, like Ludwigslust, yeah, go ahead. But don't have the milk. Don't make the train a milk run. Make sure the train goes 200 kilometers an hour. You're only taking a hit on how much the train costs once the speed goes above about 200 or 250 even, and this means that a regional train doing 200 for the most part keeps up with the intercity, and honestly the intercity is not doing much more than 200 on this line anyway. And so you're not taking some hit on train acquisition cost the way you would if you converted these to 300 kilometer an hour ICEs. You don't need that, but you do need to treat these as intercities. I mean, it's fine. You can say something about how they're technically RegionalExpress, so technically they're subsidized, but these need to be faster because essentially their only use is right now, or only, but their primary use right now is free trains between Berlin and Hamburg, and again to some extent maybe to Schwerin, and so no, Copenhagen is really elegant, and one of the things I didn't realize or didn't remember until I took these trains, I thought the trains run at the same frequency as Berlin, so 3 lines that run every 10 minutes combined. I thought it was 6 lines at 20 minutes each. No, the 6 lines are actually mostly every 10 minutes, some every 20. So the shared section is actually 30 and not 18 trains an hour. It's really exciting. And that's even not even the driverless system. The driverless system is where the screens give you the train arrival time to within half a minute, and you can absolutely have you missed a train. Yeah, the next one is in a minute or two. That's the driverless metro, but even the non-driverless S-Tog is very frequent. But anyway, so the point is that regional rail. Yeah, there's kind of romance about it. Oh, I'm taking the train like in the golden age. No, you're not. You're taking a train like in the modern age, in the golden age. The train would be a whole way steam locomotive for one. And so certainly here where there was an inner German border between the golden age and the 90s. I guess not the 90s, I guess 89, but you know what I mean? So you have all these lines with very little traffic, and yeah, you can try to run some kind of 2-car EMU on them or something on some kind of hourly takt, but it's not gonna get a lot of ridership. The ridership is not there. The ridership, I mean, these are people who drive to work. There are absolutely parts of disadvantaged, let's call it East Germany, that have high transit model split. They're the deep East Berlin neighborhood. Actually, among the 12 boroughs of Berlin, the one with the highest public transport model split for work trips is the most peripheral, Motzan-Helsdorf. Essentially, Yeah, I think it also is like number one or number two in car model split. It's just why the fuck would you bike if you live here? Um, Whereas here maybe it's less because 20-30% of the people bike. And then maybe another 35% or something like that take the train. So here's maybe 45% take the train, and just not a lot of people bike. But this is not. I mean, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern is not 45% take the train. I think it's maybe 7% or something like that. And I presume a lot of that is the cities. It's Rostock, Schwerin, Stralsund, and so it kind of bothers, I think, a lot of rail fans because it means kind of cutting all these intermediate towns off, and it always leads to a lot of populism portraying these towns like inherently more moral or something. But at the end of the day, I mean, even I was surprised by how few people live in Büchen. I thought it was going to be 15 or 20K, and it turned out to be 6K. And so all of these places, I mean, you cut these stops. All of these places combined are less than a neighborhood of Berlin. Less than a neighborhood of Berlin, and I don't even mean it. It doesn't even need to be the biggest. I think the highest population, not Bezirk, but Ortsteil in Berlin. I think maybe it's Neukölln, so maybe 160, 170. Maybe it's. Let me actually check this. It bothers me. Berlin. I remember none of them actually hits 200. No, I don't want the Bezirke. Here, the Ortsteile. Prenzlauer Berg is 168. Where's Neukölln? 165. Okay, so it's Prenzlauer Berg. So again, we're talking about a bunch of cities with 4 figures, maybe very low 5 figures. That's not where the ridership is. And this also means something about how the Deutschland ticket is used, because right now the Deutschland ticket is essentially a class system where you either pay a lot for the intercity, and like it's not like the fares are especially high, but if they're day of fares or day before fares because you realize your hotel sucks so much, you're okay just going early. The walk-up fares are really high. So if you want spontaneity, you have to take the slow train. And then the slow train is essentially just extra stops just to prevent people from going on the slow train, on the free slow train more. I guess it's like the third class in the 19th century, where they made the third class in the United Kingdom deliberately really uncomfortable so that every person who could possibly maybe afford second class would shell extra for second class. They had these things called the parliamentary trains, where Parliament passed a law saying that there must be a train with actually usable third class. I don't remember the name of this. It's called Parliamentary train. The Railway Regulation Act 1844. I don't remember the exact. Okay, so 1 train a day, 12 miles per hour. There should be a roof and seats. These should not be cattle cars. And the fare is at most a penny per mile, which I don't actually. I mean, I can look up an inflation calculator. I think it's a factor of about 150, maybe. But again, it's not going to be relevant because mid 19th century Britain was a third world country by today's income standards. Yeah, exactly. They were trying to make the service as bad as possible to get people to get people to pay for second class. And this is a lot of, and there's always this kind of enticement by managers who are trying to nickel and dime the passengers that they do this, that they keep thinking that there's some kind of economic model in which it's better for their bottom line to run a worse service. With SNCF, it's that WeGo would only serve the outlying terminals, so it would dump 1,000 people at a peripheral rail station at Marne-la-Vallée. Most of them are not Parisian. They need to buy tickets. There aren't enough fare machines. It's a 20-minute line. In addition to the RER trip time, there's not actually a track crunch at Gare de Lyon. The trains dwell forever. This is not the train station that objectively has enough tracks. It's not some kind of scarce resource. Maybe they thought of it as a scarce resource, but it wasn't genuinely scarce. And I don't even mean in the sense that they dump on high speed too. I mean in the sense that they're not even close to maxing out, even by, let's say, British standards, let alone Japanese ones, in France. And so so a lot of it is just making the service worse, trying to do some kind of market segmentation. It's not, and that's not the origin story of the Deutschland ticket. The origin story of the Deutschland ticket is that FDP decided to react to inflation by cutting taxes further, and they proposed a fuel tax cut that they were very insistent on. So the Greens said, okay, but also cut public transport fares, and a lot of people used that to get free domestic tourism and demanded it be extended. And so the Greens became the populist party and not the Build Better Trains party. And so the upshot is that these regional trains, which were not very useful, and I doubt had a lot of passengers, suddenly they get more passengers, except the passengers aren't actually paying. It's just market segmentation. But I think it's actually increasing patronage, which was not the case for WeGo. You do not see WeGo and SNCF ridership numbers, is why their finances are so bad. But its passengers are not paying at the end of the day. And so what they should be doing is making sure that this is a single class of train, doing it in an hour 30 and not in either an hour 50 if it's expensive, or 4 hours if you're not paying. Do it in an hour 30, charge fares, but don't charge very high fares. And make sure that these trains actually get to piggyback, which actually would provide better service. It means that Berlin to Schwerin would be faster. And Hamburg to Schwerin would be faster. Or Berlin to Rostock. Maybe Berlin to Rostock might be like this, but Hamburg to Rostock would be like this. And that's what they need to be doing. They need to be treating them more as intercity and not do the thing where, we reclassified them as regional, so we're going to have all these stops where nobody gets on or off. And again, I saw the exact same thing when I was doing free trips to Leipzig. The intermediate stops were basically irrelevant. I think it was Dessau to Leipzig. I'm forgetting what it was. Maybe the way back was via Wittenberg. It was the same thing. Yeah, exactly. It's just making the service worse to try to protect the revenue, except that this also degrades everything because the fast trains have to get stuck behind those slow trains. Oh God. Yeah. And this is, and it's kind of weird because in the United States, all of good activists keep talking about how things like we need regional rail, but again, they're not ever talking about regional rail. They're talking about what we call S-Bahn in Germany. It's not actual RegionalBahn where the purpose is to connect people from Berlin to Magdeburg or Berlin to Cottbus or something like that. It's things that are much more urban, much more about other kinds of trips than fundamentally interurban. They're much more about urban than interurban trips, I would say. And but whereas the regional rail system here might actually be overbuilt. I mean, I'm not saying they should remove the tracks or anything, but they should not try to get people to use it rather than the higher quality and also cheaper to provide intercities, and say cheaper to provide because this train I think, was 4 cars. So one driver on 4 cars, whereas on each set would be, if it's, maybe here it would be only 8 car, one driver on 8 cars, but on the busier trips it would be one driver on 16 cars. I don't know how many conductors there are on an intercity, but here there was a conductor. It wasn't just a random fare inspector, but just the conductor saw people's Deutschland tickets mostly. And so so if there's a conductor per 4 cars, that's like 4 conductors to a 16-car train, which is the same labor rate at Wigo. They have more on or they used to have more before it was split into Enwy and Wigo. But you can make do with 4 on a 16-car train evidently. And and these are, so it's actually more crew relative to the size of the train because the trains are shorter and the driver is split between fewer seats. Crew gets paid by the hour, not by the kilometer. So crew costs on a train that averages 70 kilometers an hour, they're 3 times as high as on a train that averages 210. No, you're not averaging 210 here, but you're averaging, I think the intercities here today are averaging 160 maybe. And they could be averaging 190 if they want to. If they wanted to. At one point they even did. So that's much higher crew costs just because they're running the train slow. Much higher rolling stock costs because regional trains, and again, they cost basically the same up to about 200 or maybe a bit more than 200 kilometers an hour. Depreciation is not based on how intensely run the train. It's actually pretty remarkable because I read all of these I read all these contracts for purchase of rolling stock, and some of them include maintenance, and the maintenance is never quoted in kilometers. It's not we pay X million euros for Y trains of this size and Z kilometers. The trains it's never priced in maintenance for, let's say, 5 million kilometers or something like that. It's priced in maintenance for years, 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years. Because the maintenance costs are that insensitive to how intensively or how fast you run the trains. They're just something you need to do at regular. The maintenance is just something you need to do at regular intervals. There's also a good reason why you should not be having very prominent peaks, as on American commuter rail. The operating costs are very much based on the peak and not the base. So just raise the base to match the peak. And again, don't think about those little intermediate towns. Like, I'm sure you can tell stories in which the people there are inherently more moral than the degenerates who live in Berlin and Hamburg or something. But the degenerates who live in Berlin and Hamburg, first of all, maybe less so Berlin because Berlin is not as rich, but the degenerates in Hamburg and in Munich and so on pay the taxes that keep this part of the country, that keeps this part of the country in the first world and not in the living standards of Hungary, first of all. And second, the degenerates here and here are the ones who are actually riding the trains, whereas the wholesome people here who probably should not ask whether they're if they're younger, whether their parents spied on everyone else for the Stasi because you won't like the answer, they drive. And this also means that future investment needs to be much more intercity and much less regionally focused, because the ridership is not generated at these little towns. Again, the medium-sized cities do actually generate things. I mean, again, there would be the Rostocks, the Schwerens, the Magdeburgs, Chemnitzes. They're. I don't know if they just electrified Leipzig to Chemnitz or if they're doing so right now. But that is, or Jena, things like that. But that's profoundly different from towns that exist only as intermediate stops. I mean, we're not even talking about Dessau, which is not that big. We're talking about things that are much smaller than Dessau. And that's just, again, not a very important, not a very important thing for transportation. How many people live in Dessau? The answer is Dessau is not even a city. It got merged. 80,000. 80,000 is a lot more than 6,000. And so this is what they should be doing. They should be thinking less in terms of regional grids and more in terms of intercity grids. I mean, not grids, but intercity integrated tucked timetables. And a lot of connections, they should not even be thinking about timed anything, because if these trains were fast and these trains were fast, this with suburbs, it's 5 to 6 million people. This is one. This complex is about 10 or 11, and the various centers here would all be getting stops, because you just run on this line and you stop at all the major stations from Dortmund to Duisburg, maybe even Düsseldorf. You do whatever you do to have a train that stops at Köln. I think Wuppertal might actually be on the way, I'm not sure. Zollingen is right now, and if you build a new line that bypasses Zollingen, then should certainly stop at Wuppertal. And then maybe Düsseldorf, and then so that generates multiple trains an hour, and I don't mean 2, I mean 6. This to this to this. And with the connection, so you go beyond, because maybe you do Hannover to Brussels if you do what Diego. What's the this blog post explains how you can actually do Brussels to Köln in an hour 15. And okay, so an hour 15, let's say an hour and a half, an hour. Yeah, that's very easy intercity trip, so people are actually going to do it. And if you do that, then you're just going to fill these intercity lines, and you can maybe have some regionals that connect with them if it's a medium-sized city that's genuinely off any useful intercity path. And again, Schwerin, Rostock are such cities. Absolutely run some things there, but run them at intercity scale. Don't try to squeeze blood out of a stone. Here would be things like Münster, Osnabrück. Definitely wrong. I don't know if all trains, but some trains stopping at Bielefeld. But again, don't try to squeeze blood out of stones. Stones don't actually bleed. Okay, why is there a train between Girona? Is it pronounced Girona or Girona? Why is there a train between Girona and Figueres to a village of 1,000 people? Like, is it like an important connection point, an important tourist destination? The way you keep saying that Oświęcim should be getting more train service than you would think based on how tiny the village is, because people do actually visit the memorial. It's kind of uncouth to call it tourism, but it's tourism. I mean, again, there are things that could be justified if there's enough suburbanization that people would be taking the train to work in the city, and then if they do, then the train would also be serving them out of work. But otherwise, I don't really see the point. Flassa. Telling me that it's a J sound doesn't actually help me when I do not know what you mean by J sound, because in French it's ja, and in Castilian Spanish it's ch, and I don't actually know enough Catalan to know whether this is pronounced Girona or Girona. Flassa. Okay. You can't even see it on there. Weird. Wait, is it Flassa or Flassa? Because of the accent on the A. Oh, French J. Okay, Girona. Okay, not Girona. I guess Girona is if they want to register my disapproval of Catalan independence or something. Okay. Yeah, so it's just I think there's kind of a tendency to dump too much on railways that focus on where the ridership is, like which something the SNCF does actually do. I mean, everyone complains about how it's gutted the regional trains, which is a nice way of saying the regions don't want to pay for it, and these lose money. But the ridership is in the big cities and around the big cities and between the cities. And you're actually making the network worse if you're trying to get them stuck behind the sort of trains that I just took today. Anyway, this is a bit more than an hour, and I will. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, these are suburbs. Tom's River has has people working there. I will meanwhile listen in. I will check questions. Please type questions, and meanwhile I will tell you about the ridership between the traffic between Tom's River, or that part of the Jersey Shore in general, and New York City while we wait for on the map to load. You see, this is not going to be a 3-hour stream. I mean, we've careened past an hour, but I don't feel guilty about an hour 20. Okay, so if we're going to do something really dumb, which is Ocean County, which I'm doing literally because I don't want to deal with because the internet is being slow and I don't want to deal with. So Ocean County has always pre-corona. How many employed residents are there in Ocean County? And Tom's River is pretty far. I think Bay Head is in the county, but it's very northern corner. So for all intents and purposes, we're talking about the entire county, which is 250,000 people live there and are employed. Advanced, I think I just need to draw a point, doesn't let me select as easily. So counties, and we're going to do all 5 boroughs, not just Manhattan, which means there will be some people who which includes some Staten Island, which is a car commute. So 250k total people live in Ocean County. How many of them work in New York City within the 5 boroughs? $8K. So not that many. It's 3.2%, I guess. 3.2% does get you classified as a suburb by Japanese definitions, which are 1.5%, not of all workers, but of the 15 plus population. And no, something about demographics would be more than 1.5, maybe 2%. So that would be a commuter train, which you can also use for regional purposes, like people taking the train to the Jersey Shore, but it's not the same as little towns of fewer than 10,000 people. I mean, maybe these are very small boroughs, but fundamentally these are contiguous suburbs, and the only reason they're separate boroughs and did not get amalgamated was school segregation. Please train to Lakewood. Lakewood is always kind of weird on this, and the reason Lakewood is always kind of weird is that people, I think, overrate how much ridership you're squeezing out of Haredi Jews. For commuter trains, these people barely work. So you have places that have high population density, and you're thinking, ooh, this is dense. These are people who could be riding trains. they don't actually ride trains as much as you would think. I mean, you can still. I mean, if there are enough people, you can still make it work. But it's kind of noticeable if you live in New York, or even if you're visiting New York and you ride the train through Haredi neighborhoods, how there are no Haredis on the train. You ride the train to Coney Island, maybe for let's say recreational purposes, or maybe you live in Coney Island. My trips to Coney Island were recreational, and you go via Borough Park, and you can very clearly see all the Haredi shops there. And there are no Haredis on the train. The only time you actually encounter large numbers of Haredis on transportation in New York City, the only time is when you fly, because they don't have their own separate bus services or wherever to get to Israel or to get to wherever they go for religious pilgrimages in, let's say, Ukraine. There's a place in Ukraine called Uman. It's a big religious pilgrimage site. I don't actually know if their pilgrimages are from New York or just Tel Aviv, but that's when you encounter them. It's something that's very unusual in American or European context, because there are no unassimilated minorities generally. The sort of minority groups that are said to be unassimilated are absolutely assimilated. They just are assimilated to working class minorities and not middle class ones. But there is an asterisk about Haredi travel. Is a thing that you would need to upgrade the track. It depends. In the United States, first of all, you need to restore service. The service is gone. If we're doing what's something called MOM for Monmouth, Ocean, Middlesex, or Middlesex, Ocean, Monmouth, I don't know the order of them. Ocean was the one I just looked at. Ocean, Monmouth, Middlesex. I don't know why it's MOM, even though the sequence is always MMO. I think it's, you branch out something on here, and let's look at Open Railway Maps, because that will actually have the railway. Yeah, it's this line, or this line, or this line. There are a bunch of options, and yeah, you can hit Lakewood and it's fine. It's just that's not at all regional rail. That's commuter rail. That's hoping that you're going to get some commuter ridership from here, which again you might. Again, density is still density, even if there's a mouse. You can do S-Bahn at long distance, and Tokyo has trains that are commuter trains for all intents and purposes that go, I think Takao is 80 kilometers. On the Tokaido main line, I don't even know what you would call the outer end. Yeah, the distance depends on the size of the metro area. I would also add that for a commuter train, if it's a larger metro area, you can get away with a higher peak to base ratio. Again, Tokyo has 2, not Berlin's 1. The reason is that if the metro area is large enough, then it exerts influence very far out. So if we're trying to think what should be the frequency on, let's say, so right now, New York City to the Northeast corridor, and I'm counting North Jersey coast, but I'm not counting Raton Valley. These lines peak, I want to say 8 trains an hour, and then 5. So 13 trains an hour. Now off peak, you should be running a large fraction of that, let's say 6-3. But you don't actually need a train every 10 minutes this far out. It's pretty far out. A train every 20 is fine. None of the connecting buses will ever run every 10. The walk up, maybe every 10, but that's a lot of ridership. And the dominant destination is still going to be the city or maybe Newark, and that's far enough that every 20 is not the end of the world. Here you might do every 10 just because that way you do maybe every 20 express, every 20 local, or maybe here there is actually more ridership. But the point is that but the point is that it is kind of enough. And then if you build Gateway and then there's a lot more ridership on these, you can actually bump the peak traffic. It's not like you need a train every 5 minutes here. I mean, if the trains fill, sure, but it's not like. But frequency creates its own ridership up to a point. So if this is a train every hour, it's bullshit. But at this distance, a train every 20 minutes might even be fine, or every 15 definitely. And so that might let you get away with a peak to base ratio that's more than the 1.3 maybe that Berlin has. And again, Tokyo is a peak to base ratio of 2, so I think this is a commuter line that happens to have an outer anchor. But anyway, I will just close on because I'm in the direct area by pointing out something, which is that I keep dumping on the intermediate cities for Schweden. This is very different with the Northeast Corridor. The Northeast Corridor, these are suburbs that genuinely produce a lot of ridership into New York City. It's not the same as Büchen. These are not Büchens. In fact, one of the reason I'm dumping on Büchen is because I know what intermediate cities that absolutely do muck intercity trains are capable of adding to the line when there's a lot of ridership there, like all of these suburbs, and these regional trains that I just showed you are not it. These Commuter trains are. So yeah, there's even some commuting on intercity, just not very common. But anyway, thank you all for watching. This was my little rant about regional trains and why. I mean, I'm glad that I got a free train, but I would have been happier to get a cheap train that did not take 4 hours. And yeah, bye there, Shadow. Thanks for joining. Thank you to all the regulars for sticking in with like a very impromptu video that started more than an hour late. Thank you, and we'll see you again. I don't even know when. Probably not this Tuesday, possibly in a week. Yeah, thanks for the feedback. And thank you, and ciao.